some of you, when you registered, you gave me some comments, and the sorts of things that people were talking about being difficult were things like price negotiations, using vague language when having a difficult conversation. Somebody who deals with the public sector was saying getting attention and getting folks to listen or understand is a challenge. Another person asked a question about how do you deal with a difficult conversation with somebody more senior than you or with a difficult person. Money conversations came into this as well. And then dealing with underperforming staff and not necessarily people who are direct reports, providing feedback to their managers or even to management generally. So I'm going to try and touch on all of these today, but do remember to pop your questions in the Q&A and I'll try and get to them when we get to the end. So on with the show. This is today's agenda. We're first of all going to take a look at what kind of desired outcomes you might be looking for. Then we'll look at what the kind of classic successful conversation anatomy is, some of the things that happen naturally, and then what usually happens when a conversation doesn't quite go as you would like it to. And then we'll sum up with some focus on key areas, and then we'll have a look at the questions that may have popped up for you as we go. So first of all, desired outcomes. When you have a difficult conversation with somebody, really you're wanting them to do one of these things here. Might be that you want them to listen, start doing something. At the bottom there, we've got stop doing something. It could be that you need them to change something, to improve, all of these things. There may be other words that you would use, but there's a desired outcome. Otherwise, why would you have a difficult conversation? Difficult conversations take place at every level, and much as we don't necessarily like to think about living in a hierarchical society or a hierarchical business, we do. And here you go. So these conversations take place with all manner of people. Could be that it's your boss, it could be that it's somebody that you work next to, could be that it's somebody that you live with, it could be your kids, vendors. You get the message. So difficult conversations are not just in business, they're not just at home, they take place all the time. And sometimes you have these conversations with people that you know well, other times you have them with somebody that you've maybe just met. And so they're all around us. It may be that it's a daily occurrence. But you know something, it could be that actually we ourselves are actually contributing to the difficulty, and we'll touch on this as we go. But think about that just as that kind of opening gambit. Is it possible that when the conversation is a difficult one, that actually you're making it difficult before it even starts, or contributing to the difficulty as it goes? I'll leave you with that thought. The second thing I want to leave you with is this. Is the conversation actually necessary? Sometimes, you know, we have to pick our battles. Sometimes we have to determine whether what we're looking for is something that's going to achieve perfection or something that is actually absolutely fundamentally vital to whatever next steps are going to happen. So the first big question that I asked was about you and your approach to it. The second one is, do you really need to have it? Or, you know, do we sometimes, it's a bit like the person that cuts you off in the traffic and then stops a yard or two in front of you at the traffic lights, and you might feel inclined to get out the car, march up to them, rant at them, and maybe find out that actually it's a guy who's 6'6" and he's actually in a bit of a mean mood. And so he's up for having a difficult conversation with you and all of that. I'm maybe not painting the best picture there, but is the conversation really necessary, or can we just let the situation go? Yeah, we'll come back to this in a moment. So what I want to do now is just run for a few moments through what the anatomy of a successful, difficult conversation would look like. And it starts with preparation. Ask yourself this question. As you think about it, how often do you go into having a difficult conversation with somebody with little or no preparation? The second thing that happens is there's the actual conversation itself. So you talk to somebody, you exchange messages with somebody, there is an interaction between you and whoever it is. And it may not be one person, it may be several people that you need to talk to, your team, a group. Then there's a period of reflection. And having had a conversation, it may be that, this new stuff's been learned, and then there's a period of reflection, and the period of reflection actually then leads to change or adaptation. Because what you had the difficult conversation about was about change. It was about stopping, starting, changing, improving, whatever. And then finally, you get back into the routine, the groove, things continue as normal. And you can see that there's a kind of a cyclical but moving forward kind of aspect to the way that difficult conversations in the perfect world go. Now, here's some of the things that happen around difficult conversations, okay? And I'm going to share this with you because these are some of the classic approaches that people take. And I'm saying don't do it. So the first thing is they don't do it. It's difficult. It's a mountain, or maybe it's a molehill that's been made into a mountain. And what they do is they just avoid it. We're not going to talk to that person. It's a bit like, the situation where maybe somebody that you work alongside doesn't have the best personal hygiene. And you decide that actually I'll change desk, or I'll go work in a different place. I'll work from home. So that's one to avoid. In fact, there's other ways. There's other ways of avoiding that as well, as I think about it. It might be that you avoid the conversation by putting a can of deodorant on the desk, or getting the boss to go have a conversation. So you've effectively kind of escalated it to somebody who doesn't need to be involved. And so avoidance is best avoided. The second thing is ambush. And I included this one because it is possible for us to ambush somebody, to hit them with something totally out of the blue. There's no preamble. So this would be the kind of thing where you just walk up to somebody, march up to them, and just start ranting. And it may be that it's about personal hygiene. It may be about the fact that the bus is late, or it's about anything. And so we ambush them. There's no preamble. There's nothing that actually warns them that something difficult is about to follow. And so what we often get there is we get them feeling ambushed, and instead of responding to your query, complaint, whatever it is, they react. And when we react to anything, it's not usually very pretty. So that's the reason why I included ambush here. This is what we do naturally. Then the other one is that we sugarcoat it. So you've got some bad news you need to give to somebody. You've got a sensitive topic you need to discuss with somebody. And what we do is we wrap so much around it, like, Nick, you're a great guy, love working with you. I think you're super at what you do. You're tall, you're handsome, all of that. And by the time we've coated the sugar around it, actually, and delivered the sensitive bit, they actually don't know what we were talking about. So sugar coating is another one that actually just diminishes what we're talking about. And then there's the compliment sandwich. So when you're about to have a difficult conversation with somebody, we feel inclined to actually present them with a compliment first, and to say to them, all of those nice things about Nick. He's a great guy, you're, talented at what you do and all the rest of it. But Nick, your body odor is just like too much to bear. And by the way, did I tell you that you're a great guy to work with? And so the compliment sandwich, again, kind of just diminishes the impact of what we're trying to achieve. So I mentioned these 4 things, and there may well be others that you've come across. If you have, please mention them there in the chat, or if you've got questions about any of these, stick them in the Q&A and we'll get to them in a little while. Okay, so moving on, going back to what we've just seen, here's what often happens. I should have used the word often instead of usual. There is a point where things break down, and it's where we've got the graphic moving on the screen. And this is what happens. It's like we actually aren't talking to each other. And what comes in is this emotion and disorientation. And these are the sorts of things that you can experience. Sometimes it's a result of poor preparation. Sometimes it's the result of, that kind of sugarcoating, not sugarcoating, ambushing people and everything. But there are these emotions and actions based on emotion that come in. Now, what these are going to do is these are going to distract away from the objective. And so when anger comes in, there's shouting. Withdrawal means that people are actually in denial, maybe, and actually step away from it and actually pretend like it never happened. Defensiveness, the need to actually defend what you're saying about me and why that is. Frustration and crying, I don't think need much explanation. But you can see that this situation here gets in the way of what you actually set out to achieve. So going back to this, we're now going to go take a look at these key elements. If we go take a look at each of these areas, you saw them in the diagram. And what I want to do is just run through these very quickly, just to sort of give you some hints as to where you might be able to do things differently. So going back to the beginning to preparation, there is that saying that if we fail to prepare, we prepare to fail. And so coupled with that, do you really need to have the conversation question? I think you need to define at the beginning what your desired outcome is. So if you know what your objective is, that's great. And honestly, preparation is so key. And I've noticed some comments kind of going in there about reflection prior to the conversation and preparation. Very, very key. Know what you want the outcome to be. Know why you want it as well. So if you're going to go into a conversation about money with your boss, don't just go into it to say, my objective is to earn more money. My objective is to earn more money because I cannot afford to pay the bills. And so know why you want it. If you're going to go into a conversation with a colleague about something to do with work, then you go into the conversation with them knowing why it's necessary, what you want the outcome to be, and really exactly what it is you're asking them to do. I've said next about respecting who you're speaking with. Everybody at every level in every business, everybody in our neighborhood, everybody in our family deserves respect. And so as you go into these conversations, having respect for the person you're going to talk with is really key. But that doesn't mean to say that actually we can't talk. And so if it is somebody more senior or somebody that's older and somebody you're going to talk to about something which is a really sensitive bit, then going into it with respect, but also that knowledge that you need to have this conversation is really key. And in your preparation, do anticipate what kind of objections they may raise. You may not be able to anticipate everything, but if it's somebody that you know already and you know, let's say example, they've got a bit of a fiery temper, then it might be that your approach to them would be different than if you were going into a conversation with somebody who's actually quite shy. If it's somebody that's on the same level as you, but not actually works with you, then you might approach that slightly differently than if you're going into a conversation with a supplier or a vendor. And so as you approach this, anticipate what kinds of things they will flag as objections, anticipate who it is you're talking with, and be prepared for managing things. So that form of preparation is really, really key. When you talk, this is not a moment to be shy and retiring, uncertain, or anything like that. Do speak with confidence, but speak with sensitivity. Don't take a sledgehammer to a nut, as we say here in the UK. I don't know how well that translates to other languages, but we go into it with confidence. We go into it with sensitivity for the other person and the fact that they may have a perspective we haven't considered, but go into it with purpose, because ultimately your aim is going to fail if you're not determined to actually see things change. And then listen. Sometimes we find all sorts of things out. I'll just share very quickly an experience I had in 1993, and you can see how scarred I am by the memory, and that's a joke. I was in a role play situation. They were videoing the role play. I was a boss. I was a manager who was delivering a piece of bad news to an employee about the fact that their timekeeping had been appalling for the last 3 months. Whilst we appreciated their work, it was a dreadful situation. And during that, he revealed, and it was role play, by the way, that actually his marriage had broken down. He was having to look after 4 kids, and he was just struggling to make ends meet. And how on earth, as a manager, did I let it get to that stage where I was having a disciplinary interview? And so when we go into this, don't go into it thinking that we know everything. Go into it knowing what we know, but actually listening actively and carefully. And do decide what the next steps needed will be. You may know them before you go in. It may be that you need to change them during the conversation. Okay, so the next thing is this period of reflection. Now, a period of reflection does not necessarily mean months. It could just mean a few minutes. It could even mean that you take a pause in the middle of the conversation just to allow for whatever has happened to be digested. So, to reflect and to consider and think. It might be that somebody has got a bit worked up and you need to cool down, but then you regroup, you revisit, because you still have that objective to reach. And then what comes after this is change. Now, this isn't something that you can always be prepared for, but when somebody is going to change, either start, stop, or change what they do, and as I say, you could be dealing with people who are quite mature emotionally, and you could be dealing with people who are less mature. But the key thing here is that you've got to accommodate. And in accommodating, they may be learning something new. They may be changing something that is difficult for them to change. It could be a habit that's been built up over 30 years, well established. They may make mistakes when they try to change. And so be accommodating of all of that. If you can support them in the change, do that. If you can guide them as they change, then celebrate what they do achieve and guide them towards the next step in getting this embedded. But there is that need to change, and that's why conversations are difficult. And then finally, here in this bit here, you've got to be consistent. You cannot let something go today and jump on it tomorrow and then let it go the day after. You've got to be tenacious as well, because change actually can be quite difficult. Always be kind. Whenever we become unkind and tempers fray and all the rest of it, then actually we move apart, we don't come together. But we do have to be firm as well. And so if there is a need to change, if we all agree that there's a need to change, then actually being firm and pushing through with that will actually do more than just actually save that person from the path that they were on. If that sounds a bit dramatic, doesn't it? But we're not wanting people to get burned out, stressed, leave, or anything like that. We're saying these things to them because we do value them, but we also value the outputs that they provide. We also value the unity in the team and all those things. And it's really, really important that we actually want all that to continue. And so we're not doing this because we are not being kind to them. We're not doing it because we don't value them. We're doing this because we do, because it would be so easy just to sack somebody, relatively speaking, metaphorically speaking. You don't want to lose people who've got experience, knowledge, and all the rest of it. Keep those good people, help them to change. Anyway, that's everything that I had for you in terms of the presentation. Time, this is such a big topic. Time does not permit for us to, do a deep dive into all of the areas. But what we can do is we can take a look at the Q&A. I see that there's two. Could we go over the compliment sandwich again? What are the drawbacks of this? The drawbacks of the compliment sandwich, in my view, are that you actually cloud the issue. So whereas the sugar coating actually just loses the issue altogether, and there's confusion, I think people feel that it's inappropriate when you have a compliment sandwich. So you say nice things about me, then you tell me that I'm not performing, then you say more nice things about me. And it actually is conflicting information, and you actually want to be consistent. I don't think that there is any harm in saying something up front like, Nick, thanks very much for coming to the meeting. We've got an uncomfortable topic to talk about here, and we'll go into that. But I just want to let you know that you are appreciated. That for me is a kind of a mild compliment, and that's fine. But don't ramble on about what a great person this person is and so forth. And I think there for me is the drawback. You just don't want the situation to seem like it's at odds with itself. Hopefully I have answered that okay. What action do you take? Sorry, I'll pop this over here. What action do you take when you feel constantly ignored, but you believe it's a critical issue, even when the powers above don't appear to listen either, because you're seen as inferior, whose views don't count? What a great question that is. I think probably I would say there, if it's a critical issue, I would ask you to go find out why they don't see it as critical. So having flagged an issue, having said to somebody who's more senior or in a different part of the business or the street or whatever to you, go have a conversation and actually say, look, I'm bothered about this. I don't seem to be getting any attention. Could you tell me how you see it? Perspective taking is really, really powerful. And sometimes we need other people to help us see it from their perspective. And that two-way dialogue that takes place when you ask that kind of question will actually help clarify why you think it's important and they don't, and they may give you a perspective. The fact is that they've listened to you, they may not be able to act on what you flagged. So I hope that is okay. How important is the next one? How important do you think following up after actions have been agreed? Absolutely vital. You cannot let this situation go. So be tenacious, make sure that that new routine, that new way of working, that new way of talking to each other is absolutely embedded, please. Nick, what about conversation that becomes difficult unexpectedly and there's no chance to prepare? This is the question here. So in this situation, I would say, and something, we can't tackle every possible scenario, but I would say that if you're in a conversation that kind of goes south, you might want to say, take a step back from that, say to the person, it might be something like somebody hurts you with something that they say, and it was unexpected. And you might just say to them something innocuous, ouch, that hurt, or I need to go reflect on that, or something like that. Gives you a chance to separate slightly, take some time out to think, and so forth. But I would say that would be the way I would recommend that you take a look at that. Any tips on how to diffuse confrontation from their side? I would say there is an opportunity to say something like, make an observation. This conversation is actually becoming a bit confrontational. Make an observation like, ouch, that hurt. That's also another one that you could use. Just things like that. Saying things that are not directly connected with the confrontation or the conflict, but are around it, I would say would actually help, just in terms of saying, that's difficult. And by the way, with all of these things, practice makes perfect. If you feel uncomfortable with difficult conversations now, the more that you kind of prepare for them and tackle them and then are persistent and so forth, it will get easier and easier. Now, we've got another one here. I've anticipated the objections, voiced them in my concerns, but they still take no responsibility for their low productivity. Okay. I think we kind of there would say we need to sort of address what it is they're hiding behind. So if they're hiding behind processes, if they're hiding behind other departments, then as a manager or as a colleague, those are what we need to do. It's almost like we remove the obstacles, we remove the objections one by one. So instead of confronting the person, we're listening to what they say, and they may say, I can't drive at 70 miles an hour because my car only goes at 60. And so what we do is we say, okay, we'll give you a car that goes at 70, if you get my meaning. So I would say in that situation, do that. Now then, we've answered all the questions, which is brilliant. Are there any other things? There's a few things I haven't covered questions that came up in the chat, so I'm sorry, I just went to the Q&A. Be making these webinars monthly. That's my aim anyway. After this event, you're going to receive 2 emails. One will come to you from the platform, giving you access to the recording, the transcript, and the slides from today. And the second email will come later on in the day, and that will actually contain the links that will enable you to book for the workshop or for the next webinar. And please do give me feedback. I'd love to hear it. Tell me what other topics you'd like to be covered as well. And I'd like you to share the love, tell colleagues, friends, family, if you think this has been valuable use of your time. And I hope to see you in the next one.